Hey, everybody. First, before we get started, we wanted to encourage you to enter our new sweepstakes that we're being involved in. It is Grill on the Green with true Aussie beef and lamb and the big green egg.
Yeah, the big green egg lets you be a pitmaster in your own backyard. It is a smoker and a grill. You can use lump charcoal and you get this awesome flavor to your food that you can't get anywhere else.
Oh, it's so good, Sharon.
And the giveaway is through True Aussie Beef and Lamb. That's sold. You can find them at Whole Foods and Costco.
At least in our neck of the woods.
Yeah. And the big green egg, you can win a large big green egg.
Yep.
Just go to grillonthegreen.com and let them know that Hungry Squared referred you and you could be entered to win.
The sweepstakes ends on August 1st, so get on over to grillonthegreen.com and tell them that we sent you, and because we want one of our listeners to win, right, Sharon?
Oh, yeah.
We want you to win. Anyway, so head on over to grillonthegreen.com.
Winter,
Yes?
why can't the bankrupt cowboy complain?
Why?
He's got no beef.
Hungry Squared, bringing you the best food talk anywhere.
Welcome to the Hungry Squared podcast where the brain and belly meet. I'm Sharon from the Wasatch Cooking Guide.
And I'm Winter from theredparty.com. This week, we are talking about Trappist beer monasteries. You guys, it's a thing.
We're talking about beer.
Beer, but specifically from the Trappist monasteries.
Yay!
It's a thing. Let's talk about it.
Hungry Squared.
Sharon, how has your week been?
It's been great.
It's been a hot one this week.
Oh, yeah. We've been grilling out a lot.
Yes. So we mentioned this earlier, but we are partnering with True Aussie Beef and Lamb for this awesome summer sweepstakes. And because they want us to hashtag own your party. And I feel like I did that this week and you probably did too, it sounds like.
I did too. I owned the party a couple of times.
Okay, well, tell me what you ate.
We had lamb tacos, which we'll be featuring on our
blog.
Yeah, on our blog, on our website at hungrysquared.com. And I also had ribs. You guys, these ribs were amazing. So was the lamb, but I'll talk more about the lamb on the blog. But these ribs, oh my gosh.
So you did it on the big green egg then?
I did. We smoked them all day. Well, like for, I don't even know, 6 or 7 hours. And it is better than any barbecue that I've ever had. Like, I don't even have to go to a barbecue restaurant anymore if I don't want to.
Because you can do that.
At home.
Freaking awesome.
They're incredible. We did a little bit of a rub on them. Just a basic, like, I think it was like a basic steak seasoning rub, which, I mean, just store-bought, seasoning. No big deal. Rubbed it on. It was amazing.
Wow. How long?
How long did we smoke them?
Yeah, how long?
It was like 6 or 7 hours. I don't remember.
Right.
But I mean, several hours. But the big green egg, once it goes up to temperature, it stays pretty well and consistent. It's great.
It is pretty awesome.
What did you eat this week, Winter?
Okay, well, so I hashtagged own my party as well. Actually, it's hashtag you own your party. This last week, I technically didn't make it. I was an observer.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
What did you observe?
So Lee got a beef brisket and smoked it. And it was amazing because he made it a chashu smoked brisket.
What is a chashu?
So like, chashu pork.
Nope.
You know, that Chinese red pork that you see at Chinese restaurants.
Okay.
It's called chashu.
It's like bright red.
Bright red.
Mm-hmm.
We don't put the red food coloring in.
Oh, okay.
So we usually have done it in the past with, we make our own pork, but Lee's like, I'm going to just try it on a beef brisket because then we can bust it out and try it on a few other things, especially like the lamb, what we're going to do in a little bit. But he tried it and it was amazing.
Yummy.
He nursed that for about 8 hours.
Yep.
And that's when I feel like it just shone. It was so good.
It's the low and slow, people. Low and slow.
And it was just like right on smoky flavor plus all of those Chinese spices. It was so good, you guys. I will have that recipe on the show notes. Well, on the blog this week.
Yeah. The thing I like, I'm just going to say about the smoker is that sometimes when you grill outside, it gets hot because you don't want to heat up your house because it's so hot. It's been in the hundreds all this week where we're at.
It's miserable.
And when you grill, I mean, that's cool because you're just, doing it quick and fast usually. But It's hot. It's hot to stand over a flame. It's hot to stand like outside in 100-degree heat. It's hot. But with the smoker, low temperature, slow. Once you get it up to temperature, which doesn't take terribly long.
Nope.
It just stays consistent. And when you go out to kind of check on it and stuff, you don't get this like burning hot flame in your face. You don't start sweating over the grill or anything like that. So it's just really nice.
The other thing I really like
you
about...
You can stay inside in the air conditioning and tend it that way.
Yeah.
And just kind of periodically go and check.
Well, and the thing is, Lee, I think he hardly opened it because they have a couple of flues.
Right. That's
at the
how
top
you're adjusting your temperature.
And the bottom. And then they have this temperature, basically a thermometer right on the top. So Lee would just go out and like, okay, we've maintained temperature. I'm going to go back in now.
Right. And if you're not, then you just adjust your openings.
Yeah.
So
super easy. Yeah, so we've eaten a lot of yummy barbecue and smoked goods.
Yum.
And now for the main course.
Okay, let's get down to our first topic at hand. We are with the ladies from TrappistBeerTravels.com. You also might know them from the famous blog bitchbeer.org. They are Sarah Wood, Jessica Deahl, and Caroline Wallace. They are food writers, and they have toured all over the world to the Trappist monasteries, the Trappist monastery breweries specifically. And we're here with them today to talk about their new book that just came out at the end of May called Trappist Beer Travels. And you can check out their book at TrappistBeerTravels.com.
And I just want to say that being somebody that doesn't drink beer or alcohol in general, I really enjoyed this. This was such a fun interview. I learned so much, Sharon. Like,
yeah,
I know you guys are going to enjoy this because they get into the history and the science. I mean, it's great.
Yeah. So drinkers, non-drinkers alike, stay tuned for some interesting history and science. Hi, everyone. We're here with Sarah Wood, Jessica Deahl, and Caroline Wallace. They are the authors behind the Trappist Beer Travels book. And these three writers are behind the popular all-women run beer blog called bitchbeer.org. They have collectively visited hundreds of breweries, covered national beer events, and interviewed some of the biggest names in the industry. For this book, they've journeyed thousands of miles together from the United States to Belgium, the Netherlands, Austria, Italy, and back again for the complete tour of the world's authentic Trappist monastery breweries. Thanks so much for being here today with us, ladies.
Thank you. We're so excited to join you guys today.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us a little bit about beer brewing and monasteries and like the history behind that? Like, how did it start?
Yeah. Well, by most accounts, beer brewing goes back to ancient Egypt, to Mesopotamia. There's, really great evidence that beer has been, a big part of civilization. Really, as long as we've had agriculture, we've had beer. When it particularly comes to monasteries, monasteries were known for a place where, you'd have a community of monks or in some cases nuns, living at these monasteries, and they could be in oftentimes really remote areas. So people who were passing through the area, beer was a big part of, having something hearty to offer them as they stayed the night. And as a lot of history says that, water wasn't actually potable, right, in the Middle Ages. So by boiling it and turning it into beer, you made that safe to drink. So beer was not only a fun social beverage, but actually really important for nutrients and making sure you had, clean drinking water. So that was a big part of it, particularly when it comes to the Trappist monks. They follow the rule of St. Benedict, which is a rule that a lot of different monastic communities around the world follow, but it really emphasizes a balance between, both prayer and solitude, but also work as a tenet of the faith. So that's why you see so many monasteries around the world, producing a variety of, really high quality handcrafted goods like cheeses or honeys or breads, liqueurs, wines, and in this case, beer. So that was kind of our goal with this book, to visit all 11 of the current Trappist monastery breweries in the world.
So were all of them monks or were some of them nuns that are brewing this beer right now?
So currently it's only monks who are brewing beer, but there are some monasteries with nuns around the world who make wine or spirits. So those ladies are making some alcohol too.
Nice.
So really quickly, I just wanted to clarify. So the Trappist, can you go back to where the Trappist came from? Did you say that it was kind of an offshoot of some of these monasteries? Can you explain a little bit more? Where did the term Trappist even come from?
Sure. So the Trappists they're a Roman Catholic cloistered, contemplative, monastic order. And basically, they were an offshoot of Benedictine monks, which is a subsect of Catholicism. And then that offset into a group of Benedictine monks. So there was a kind of a big problem in the Middle Ages of wealthy families sending, maybe their younger sons in the family off to live in a monastery if they didn't think that they had a future in carrying on the family name in commerce or in battle or that kind of thing. So you had a lot of, quite frankly, rich, lazy dudes living in monasteries who really weren't there for the right reasons. And so part of what happened with the Cistercian faith, which is a precursor to the Trappist, was they wanted to live a more austere life that was more in line with the rule of Saint Benedict, really just focused on prayer and work. So there was a little wooden thicket called Citeaux in France, and that's where some monks broke off to start the Cistercian order. And then from there was a reform period in the 17th century where they wanted to get even stricter, and that kind of started at an abbey called La Trappe in France. And so that's where now you get the order of Cistercians of the strict observance, and they're more commonly known as Trappist.
Oh, okay. That is so interesting that there were some lazy monks and then people wanted to be more strict. Okay.
Right. Yeah. A lot of stories of corruption along the way.
Yeah, these people came from money, and so they brought that money with them when they entered the brothership, which meant, or the community, which meant they didn't need to work necessarily because they had wealth already just flowing in with their new membership. But that's not part of St. Benedict's decree. Ora and labora is prayer and work. So yeah, the Cistercians wanted to get back to that, and then the Trappists wanted to take it even one step further.
So it's kind of, I'm sure it seems ironic that this religious faith that just tried to get stricter and stricter is now known for brewing some of the best beer in the world.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of. But can we actually go a little bit more into that? Because I love when I found out kind of this philosophy that they had, because this is one thing I did not realize, and we can get into it a little bit more, but I thought Trappist beer was a style of beer. Like I thought it was a particular, it's a dark ale and it should be these are the criteria for it. And when I read a little bit more that it's not, it's actually to get a Trappist beer designation, there's a criteria. Can one of you guys explain what this criteria is for producing authentic Trappist beer?
Right, that's kind of a common misconception about Trappist being a style, and we definitely want to help dispel those sort of rumors. A lot of them end up brewing Belgian style beers, which is most commonly what maybe people will. Sorry. So the three basic tenets to be considered an authentic Trappist product are that it's brewed in the monastery walls and that it's overseen by the monks. So a lot of the breweries will actually have lay people that they employ, but it has to be eventually overseen, quality control by the monks. And then also that all the proceeds go back to the monastery, and then any extra goes to charity. So they're actually all nonprofits.
So they have to be making some profit because from what I've read, this is pretty good beer. And I know that I've actually had a couple of them. So do you know how much they're donating roundabout and what types of charities they donate to?
It really depends on the abbey. So the first priority is really for these monasteries to be, self-sustaining. If you think about a lot of them, the buildings are, hundreds of years old. And in some of the places they are, on the border between Belgium and France, or the newest Trappist monastery brewery is a very old monastery in the heart of Rome. So anytime they have to make repairs to these buildings, think about the historical commissions that have to get involved, the materials, the getting up to code, all these things. So really the primary beneficiary of the money from these breweries is the abbeys themselves, and maintaining that way of life for the generations to come. And then what some of the abbeys have are daughter houses. So they'll start another abbey, say in a different part of the world, like there's a few in Africa. And so those monasteries might not have as successful and large businesses operating out of them yet. So then so you see a bigger, Trappist brewery like a La Trappe or a Chimay, and you see a lot of beer and you think this is a big operation. And in terms of barrels produced, it is, but that just means that they have a bigger community of monks living there, that they might be supporting other daughter houses. And then in terms of other charities, it really just varies by the abbey. So Zundert in the Netherlands. They would work with different local charities. We saw at La Trappe, they had like a garden on site, and they brought in people from the community with disabilities to work in the garden. So the money would go to their salaries there, doing this work there. Really a variety of different causes. The town of Chimay is really supported by the monastery. I mean, even things like they're sponsoring local, baseball teams and an airfield in the community and things like that.
Encouraging entrepreneurship in that region of Belgium, which is really a remote region, rural,
That's awesome. I didn't realize that they supported so many daughter houses, but I guess that makes sense. So that's cool.
Okay, so this is coming from Winter, who is the non-drinker in the room. And so if Trappist beer is not necessarily style, you can make all types of beers. And I think you mentioned that a lot of these are Belgium style beers. Can you just do a quick beer 101 primer? Give me a quick glossary of what types of beers could be made. And just because I know that there are some listeners that are younger and they may not drink and or maybe not familiar with that. So can you kind of describe that for me and for some of our listeners?
Well, one of the great things about, what we call here craft beer and what a lot of the Belgians we met called special beers is that there's a huge variety. So if you think about your, light lagers that you would drink in America, your Bud Miller Coors of the world, there's a much bigger, obviously, style variety of beer out there. And Trappist beers, because 6 of the 11 authentic Trappist monasteries are in Belgium and 2 more are just across the border in the Netherlands, they just do have a rich history of being a lot of Belgian-style beers. And some of the most common are the triple, the double, and the quad. So triple is kind of a sweet, lighter in color, still definitely going to be boozier than your lagers or your pale ales, your IPAs, or that kind of thing. But still light in color. And then a double is going to be a maltier, kind of mid-range alcohol beer. And a quad is a very strong, very dark, kind of luscious beer with can have some, tobacco notes or fruit tones or chocolate qualities sometimes, anise, lots of different flavors.
Christmas cookies, lots of spicy things.
Yeah.
Those darker ones are the ones I prefer. I think they just have like the sweet taste. It's good.
Yeah. So Belgium has a rich history of having these like higher alcohol, beers. And what a great thing that we heard from a lot of the monks is they're beers for contemplation. Just like the monks of lives of contemplation. These are beers that you don't drink to get drunk. You don't pound back, 5 or 10 of these beers. You take your time, you share a bottle with a friend, you soak it in, you talk about the flavors. It's, a real experience.
What's the alcohol content range typically?
If we're talking about from doubles, triples, and quads, could be anywhere from like 6% to all the way up to like 12% alcohol. So high for beer, obviously lower than a wine or liquor. But there's another really interesting style called a Pater's beer, which several of the Trappist monasteries brew, and that means father's beer. And sometimes they call it a refectory beer. And that's a kind of style that was traditionally reserved for the monks. So when we talk to the monks, a lot of them will admit that they don't really drink the higher alcohol content beers, or maybe they do on Christmas or a special occasion. But these Pater's beers, these lower alcohol beers, are kind of what they would have with a meal more commonly. So that's another really interesting style, and that can be more like 5 or 6%, a little, up to 7, a little lower than certainly the triples, doubles, and quads.
So traditionally, those haven't been the primary things that they bottle and sell. Those things they keep for themselves and for their guests when they do have religious retreats on site, or they have in the past guests who are travelers. But now we see people are beginning to bottle those and put them on the market. Chimay has a Pater's beer style ale, Chimay Gold, and Trappist ale from Spencer is also in that vein a little bit, sort of walking the line of Pater's beer and then more traditional Belgian style.
Yeah, and Spencer, for people who don't know, is the only American Trappist monastery brewery, and they're just about an hour outside of Boston in Spencer, Massachusetts.
How long has that been around? How many years has that monastery? Abbey's been around.
Yeah, they've been in Massachusetts since the 1950s. Before that, they were in Rhode Island, and the community moved because they had a fire. But they just started their brewing operations, in the last 5-6 years. So that's of the 11 Trappist monastery breweries, 8 of them have been brewing for decades to hundreds of years, and then we see 4 which is Zundert in the Netherlands, Stift Inkelcell in Austria, which is just across the border from Bavaria, Chef Fontana in Rome, and then Spencer here outside of Boston, that have all just been making these beers in like the last 5 years or so. And they started these breweries because they needed another stream of revenue to sustain their monastery into the future. And they looked to other abbeys that were, having success with their breweries, and the Trappist beers had such a great reputation around the world that they, really thought this was a great idea. So it's interesting that we have seen this kind of resurgence of several more Trappist breweries being added to the list around the world, and that's why I thought it was a really good time for this book to, talk about some of these newer abbeys in particular.
For sure. So since some of them are newer and then some have been brewing beer for several hundred years, as it were, can you talk a little bit about the technology that everybody's using? Is it all modern technology? Are some of them doing it, I don't know, the old way, whatever that way would be?
Part of maintaining your authentic Trappist product certification through the International Trappist Association is verifying that you're using the highest quality ingredients and really making the product to the most perfect, wonderful thing that it could be. So a lot of the monasteries have updated their technologies, A, to make the beer consistently wonderful, and B, to give them a little bit of peace of mind. I mean, they're also monks, so they have to leave multiple times during the day to go to prayer sessions, to go to mass. So the automation also helps them out to maintain that, as well as leaning on the lay people to monitor the system while they're away.
Yeah.
That
So I think people would be surprised. You hear this, you hear a multi-hundred-year-old abbey brewing beer, and you expect to go in and just see a bunch of, barrels and mash paddles, but no, there's a lot of stainless steel. There's a lot of, touchscreen monitors. We even saw at the Trap in the Netherlands, they have a ton of solar panels that are powering their facility, and we saw some other solar panels at other places as well. So just also, I think being European, they're just more on the forefront of some of those, eco-friendly technologies, and a lot of beer manufacturing equipment is manufactured in Germany and in Belgium. So, more of an access to that cutting edge technology. When you think about, you're saving on the shipping costs of any brewery that gets a system from, Germany over to the United States, you're going to add a lot of money in shipping that they're not necessarily paying as much for.
That's
What's
totally
also really
true.
Cool.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
That's all right. What's also really cool is there's a recycling program that's pretty global in the European communities, the European breweries, where they reuse the glassware, they reuse the bottles. So once you've drank a beer as a consumer, you give that back. They collect them at all different distribution points. They distribute them back out to the proper location. It could be a monastery, it could be just another production brewery. They clean them and then they reuse them. And so they're not paying for new glassware every single time they run a new production of a beer. They can reuse things a little bit.
Oh, I
Which I
love
also think is a really cool thing about them, that they're thoughtful in that way and have been for decades.
that. Is I think we would benefit from that type of thing here in the United States a little bit more. Oh my goodness. I am impressed. I really, okay, so because I don't know anything about beer, I really was thinking that these monasteries were doing something very, barrels. That's what I have in mind, barrels and that type of thing. So that is really cool that they're implementing some really nice technology to make it work, make their beer really good. So I do have a question because once again, novice here. So you mentioned the darker ales that they have, the darker beers. And you mentioned kind of some spicier notes or that type of thing. I'm assuming though, that the hops that they get, you get different flavors because of where they source those. Can you talk a little bit about flavors and the different notes that you're going to get because of where they're getting their supplies, I guess?
Yeah, so there are four main ingredients that go into beer: water, hops, yeast, and malt. Generally, there are four main ingredients that go into beer: water, hops, yeast, and malt. And malt is most commonly malted barley, but sometimes wheat or sorghum or other cereal grains, oats, can go into beer. And each of those can lends really unique things to the flavor of beer. For each of the monasteries, a really important part of their kind of origin stories and why they started brewing beer and why they're proud of the character of their beer is the water. They're all fed by spring water, generally, especially just because they're so old. There weren't in rural areas, there weren't, municipal, public water lines in a lot of those areas when they started brewing. So that's something that lends a really unique quality and, a minerality to the beer. And then you have yeast, and a lot of breweries will use that. They'll develop over time, through work with a lab or through work with a commercial lab. Every brewery is different, but a house yeast strain. So that yeast will lend a lot of character to the beer. And then when we talk about malt, the different levels that it's roasted or kilned at can lead to different things. So when you see a darker beer, that's usually because it has a darker roast to the malt. And then, hops. So hops are grown all over the world. We grow a lot in the United States and the Pacific Northwest. Traditionally, things like noble hops are grown in Germany. There's hops grown in Belgium. There's hops grown in the Czech Republic. There's hops now grown in Australia, New Zealand, even South Africa. There can be a really, really wide array of flavors that come from those hops. Generally, with the darker beers, those different notes you're going to pick up are going to be from the yeast and the malt. And some beers then have adjuncts on top of that, like Chimay Gold, which Sarah was talking about earlier, the Pater Spirit Chimay. That beer has orange peel and coriander in it. So you also have those additional ingredients that are lending, flavor.
That orange peel one sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for explaining that, because I really did not know that. I love we've talked about yeast before on our podcast. And so when you say that they've developed their yeast and maybe even with a commercial lab, but do you know of any of those older monasteries that have kind of kept their same yeast strain or basically cultivated it through the years? Do you know how old some of those yeasts are?
Some of them, so Chimay, for instance, they were brewing beer prior to World War II, in the south of Belgium. And during World War II, and this happened to a lot of monasteries because they're positioned usually in, think about this, rural areas on borders with a bunch of pacifists living in like a fortified community. It's a pretty good target for an occupation. So Chimay was occupied during World War II, and the Germans stripped all the copper from the brew system and kind of devastated the brewery. So part of coming back from that, Sarah tells the story better, but the abbey, I'll let you take it.
Right. So there's a very famous brother who he eventually became the Dom of that monastery, Brother Theodore, who after World War II, they sent the community went back to Scoremount Abbey, which is the name of the abbey. They needed to restart the brewery in order to start making revenue again. And they sent a very young Brother Theodore to essentially brew college, where he developed, he learned his brewing vocabulary, came back to the monastery, began brewing commercially, and developed a strain of yeast that's become pretty critical to their story. And so that's the yeast that they're sustaining now. They have this really state-of-the-art sort of, it looks like a stainless steel milk silo, and it's filled with yeast. You can see it like frothing around in a little glass window that they monitor. They test it all the time to make sure that it's healthy. With brewing, you can reuse the same sort of batches of yeast, and you can either propagate that into new generations. If you've used the same yeast a few times, it doesn't ferment the same way because the yeast is getting old. It's just not as powerful. So you can reuse it in a batch of beer, or you can propagate it and create new generations of that yeast. And that's how they continue it since, this is the 1950s that he was creating this strain of yeast, and they're still using a derivative of that today for their beers, which is a really interesting, cool thing that they have this living history that's still bringing them what they need to live.
That's amazing. I love that story. So can you tell me a little bit about the glassware? I know that typically as I've been looking online and things, it looks like they use a lot of chalices for their beer. The different monasteries do. Is there a certain reason why?
Well, I think it's equal parts branding and just how they want the beer to be best presented. So, obviously it's great for the brewery when people can drink the beer and get to see the logo and have a shape of glass that really, speaks to the monastery. They're also designed, that goblet-y chalice shape that most of these have. Most of these, Trappist monasteries have selected for their beers. They're really great for aroma and for head retention on the beer. So by having that narrow bottom and that wider top, that helps you to get a better smell of the beer. And it also can help, a lot of these beers have a secondary undergo a secondary fermentation in the bottle. So what that means is prior to bottling, it'll get dosed with a little bit of extra, in most cases, Belgian candy sugar and yeast, which that yeast will eat the sugar, and then do this little second fermentation in the bottle. So when you're pouring these beers, you can pour them clean and kind of make sure not to tilt the glass too much and leave some in the bottom, or some people prefer to, slowly mix it up a little and try the yeast. I like to try it clean. We save a little at the bottom, then we pour again and try it with the dregs, as we call it. So those glasses can be helpful for that.
Nice.
Kind of let some of that settle bottom as well.
So does that mean that when you go to the Trappist monasteries, is all of the beer already bottled, or is any of it on tap?
A few Trappist monasteries keg. So in the U.S., what we see, like if you go to a beer bar, most commonly, if you're going to find a Trappist beer on tap, you'd find a Chimay or La Trappe, or two of the biggest ones, and they keg. Some of the breweries are just exclusively bottles, and some do a mix. Some do a mix where it might be common. Many of the Trappist abbeys have a cafe on site where you can come, and that's a big thing we talk about in the book. Is some of these abbeys are really not open to visitors, and some, while you might not be able to tour the brewery, you can come to the cafe, you can taste the beers. Maybe they have a tour of the grounds you can take, those sorts of things. So sometimes you'll find that they'll have kegs and beers will be on tap at those abbey tasting rooms, but they might not be, necessarily on tap all around the world, but more commonly in bottles.
Excellent. I gotta hold that thought really quickly because I want to ask about your travels because that is super fascinating. But can I go back to that second fermentation thing you were talking about? So they add extra sugar and yeast into it after it's been bottled. Is that
right? As they're sealing the bottle. Yeah.
Yes. So it can continue to develop the flavor, is what you're saying, right?
Correct. That is exactly why they do that. Is they give it a little boost of sugar and a little extra yeast. So that beer can continue to develop. And that's why things like Chimay Blue, you can keep a bottle of Chimay Blue for 30 plus years and it transforms and takes on a very different characteristic in each part of its development after it's bottled.
What?
We were lucky enough at Chimay to try a bottle from 1997 of Chimay Blue, which was just mind-blowing. It's such a cool experience, and it's very, I think the thing as a beer drinker and maybe a beer collector is you can experience that beer in multiple stages in its development too by just holding onto those bottles, keeping them in a cool, dark space and just letting them be happy, and let that yeast do its thing with the sugar that remains in the beer.
Now, would it ever go too far, like it's already eaten up all of the sugar? I'm just wondering like you obviously had one from 1997, so that flavor, the sugar's all eaten up?
They have the best, the sugar in that would be mostly gone, I would think.
Right, I hope.
And the breweries themselves do have drink by dates.
Okay.
So that you can experience it the way that they intended when they bottled it. What I'm saying is it gets good past that date. It's not going to go bad to the point where you couldn't drink it anymore. It just may not have the same characteristics that the brewer intended, but those characteristics can also be compelling and frankly delicious. So you get to experiment a little bit as a drinker in that way.
So right now we're in Chicago doing some events for the book, and yesterday we had an event at a brewery called Old Irving Brewing, and we had some people out, and we brought some beers from the trip. Jessica still had some in her stash that were 2.5 years old, a variety of styles, and we opened them up, and all of the beers were just really great and really interesting in different ways, and some still taste somewhat similar to what they did 2.5 years ago, and some have taken on completely different flavors and are interesting and tasty in different ways.
You guys sound like beer sommeliers.
Yeah.
Like seriously, I just didn't think that there was you just think of, at least because I'm a novice, right? Once again, I don't drink beer and so I don't know, but I didn't realize that there could be some aging and development of flavor. So that's cool.
Yes, some styles age better than others. Generally, one good tip is higher alcohol beers tend to age better, but that's not always the case. Some lower alcohol beers age pretty well as well. What you typically don't want to age are hoppy beers. If you are really looking for a hop forward beer and that's where the flavor is coming from, an IPA or a pale ale, something like that, or even like just a straightforward lager or something, those are beers that are usually better fresh. But some of these bigger, higher alcohol beers with a lot of different flavors going on age really well.
I should say too, for people that maybe are novice at this and want to try aging, that I do not have proper bottling conditions, and we drink all the beers we made yesterday drink really well. So I was very nervous about it, sharing it with people, but yeah, they were all delicious.
Yeah. long as you don't have it in a big old light struck window or something.
They've just been hanging out in the closet under a bed for 2.5 years. So.
An interesting thing about most Trappist beers is because they're boozy and a little bit sweeter, and they have those Belgian yeast strains going on. Most, not all. They tend to do okay with oxidation, which is a problem that you sometimes have when you cellar something at the wrong temperature. Oxygen can affect the temperature or the flavor of the beer, but all of these other characteristics kind of like work in line with that, which is a really unique thing in aging beers. That can be an okay flavor to introduce. I mean, try it without. Hopefully, all your beers aren't terribly oxidized, of course, but yeah, they're a little more resilient. They're a little more resilient to that off flavor.
Yeah, that's what I'm always afraid of, is the skunk flavor.
Yeah, and I mean, if you put it in a light window, it's gonna skunk, but
Right.
And that's different than oxidation. That's a different flavor that is almost never acceptable, except in some Belgian lambics. Trappist monasteries don't make these, but there's some kind of you see a green bottle and you usually think of a cheaper kind of beer, but there are some amazing spontaneously fermented lambic beers from Belgium that are in green bottles, and they have decided that skunking is, historically made the beer taste better in, people's opinions. So that's kind of an exception to the skunking, but in general, skunking not good.
Right. So can you tell us a little bit more about your travels and what your method was of exploring each monastery and their beer? Or did you have a method? I don't know.
So I guess like the process of the whole book's inception, we sort of came up with this harebrained idea over beers, went through a publisher. So we used that as sort of leverage and validity to sort of pursue this project. And we went through the ITA, which is the International Trappist Association, sort of an umbrella organization that oversees all of the Trappist monasteries and ensures quality, and they're following all their tenets. And so that really helped us sort of slowly get everyone on board for interviews and tours. And we sort of worked around all the monks' various schedules and then planned our whole trip. So we kind of did it all in one fell swoop in about 3 weeks in the summer of 2015. And then our manuscript was due at the end of that year. So it was a little bit of a whirlwind
3 weeks, I'd say.
endeavor.
Wow.
Yeah, so we got to stay in Rochefort in French Belgium for 2 nights. So that was pretty incredible, staying at the monastery. They were all sort of different experiences, but we did get a tour and an interview at all of the locations. Our book has over 200 photos, so kind of got rare access for people that might never get to make it there.
That is so cool. I travel for food, so this is like, so you guys said that you kind of got some interviews on the back end, or and were able to kind of work through the organization of the Trappists so that you could get these interviews. But if I was somebody that wanted to travel and do kind of a mini tour or something of these monasteries, how would you recommend going about doing this?
Yeah, read our book.
Pick up the book.
Then in that case, we'll do that.
Yeah. We end every chapter. So basically a typical chapter in the book, there's an introductory chapter that talks about the history of the Trappist religious order and kind of the relationship with beer. And then the rest of the book, with the exception of the conclusion as well, is kind of one abbey per chapter, a dedicated chapter each. And we talk about kind of our experience going there and who we spoke with. And we talk about, then we kind of launch into the history of the abbey, the history of brewing at the abbey, and just kind of what's happening current day and the processes. And then we end each chapter with tasting notes on all the beers they produce. And then we go into some travel tips. So that's the biggest thing, because so many of these are known for being, very elusive, not offering public tours. We try to talk about at this abbey, here's what you can do as a visitor. So it really varies by abbey, but a lot of them have a cafe you can experience. Some of them have guest house accommodations, like where we stayed at Rochefort, or Chimay actually has a small hotel where we stayed as well. So we talk about if you're able to stay there. In many cases, staying in the guest house at the abbey pretty exclusively is typically reserved for people who are going for religious contemplation, not beer tourists. So staying at the abbey is can be rare, but if you're going for both, definitely it's recommended. But yeah, no, we talk about all kinds of different things. So like, I'll give you one example, Orval, which is a beautiful abbey in the south of Belgium. They're one that have probably a lot more public opportunities than most abbeys. They have what's called open door days, like once per year, where people can do a tour of the brewery. But besides that, you can't tour the brewery, but they do have a cafe where they can taste the beers and the cheese, and they have full meals and everything. They have a monasterium there at the abbey with a lot of cool artifacts. They have a medicinal plant garden. They have nature trails around the abbey. And then the neatest thing they have are these monastic ruins. So it's ruins of their medieval monastery that was destroyed, and then they, built a new adjacent monastery. But those are, if you check out, our website, check out the book. That's one of the most photographed elements in the book. Probably are these really well-preserved, beautiful arches of these ruins. And part of the year they do guided tours, so you can actually have, someone from the abbey, commonly a monk, take you around and give you a tour. You can also do self-guided tours. So those are some of the kind of things you can, experience at the Abbey. Even if you can't go on a tour of the brewery, you can really get a sense of the solitude and the work that goes into it, and why these places are really special by visiting and experiencing what you can't experience. And some you can attend religious services as well and hear the monks chant and sing, which is really neat.
That is awesome. Okay, that gives me some ideas to explore. I have another question. Because we talk about food all the time, and that's what we do here. What other food? I've heard that you've mentioned cheese and other foods that they do. What other things did you eat, and what other things do they produce besides beer?
Ooh.
Or what have you tried, while you were on your travels?
It varies by abbey. So Chef Fontana in Rome, they also make chocolate. So we had some amazing chocolate. They also make liqueurs, including a eucalyptus liqueur called Eucalyptino that was incredible. Spencer in Massachusetts, before they became a brewery, they were actually really well known for jams and jellies, and they still produce those. So they have all kinds of things, from fruit preserves, like Trappist preserves, they call them, to I got a chipotle pepper one that was like a sweet pepper jam, kind of sweet and spicy. That was really neat. What else? All kinds of things.
Yeah, we ate a lot of cheese on our trip, for sure. We got a tour of the cheese factory at Chimay, which was pretty incredible. Huge operation. They have many just giant wheels of cheese that are washed in their beer. And, yeah, it got funkier. Each room we entered got funkier and funkier in like the best way possible.
That sounds delightful.
There are other wares that aren't necessarily food, that they are also making liturgical garb, religious jewelry, things like that, candles, wine, which we mentioned, which is considered food. But so they find the markets to fill that they feel most adept at, and then they make things that fill those needs.
Yeah. There's a really handy chart in the book that I got to lay out with all of the monasteries, what they make, and if it's an official Trappist product.
So the Trappist okay. I know that you mentioned that there's an association and kind of a designation. So that Trappist product designation has to be approved by this organization to actually have the seal or the sticker or whatever it happens to have.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, those 3 tenets we talked about for breweries. If a brewery meets all those tenets, as well as quality and safety things, and they do some inspections where they come back and check and make sure the quality is still up to snuff, then you can apply and go through a process and get that label. So the 11 we visited are there's 11 breweries whose beers carry these marks. But then that same certification can go for other Trappist products as well, like cheese and some other things we talked about. So the chart is handy to cross-reference.
Okay, that's good to know.
Protecting their brand, especially with beer, it kind of became popular, and there's lots of monks showing up on beer labels, and so they wanted to really protect their whole brand and their quality.
Right.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, that makes sense actually. Okay. Well, I have a couple of last questions, and first of all, I want to say thank you. This has been delightful, and I've learned a lot. I'm sure Sharon's nodding her head right now.
Yes, this has been so great. Thank you so much.
And
we've had so much fun.
Yeah, it's been awesome. But we usually ask our folks that we interview one last question, and it's usually the question is basically, tell us something about yourselves or that most people don't know about that you can share with us. And I'm going to twist that a little because there's 3 of you, and I'm going to ask, tell us something about your travels that not very many people know about when you were doing your research for the Trappist Beer Travels book, and maybe a story that happened to you guys and it's not in the book and you haven't really told many people. I love hearing people's travel stories. So if you have anything that you guys would like to share, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, how about, so one of the interesting things about tackling this book was not only all the travel involved, but all of the different languages involved with the interviews. So we needed to find interpreters to help us with this. So we had a whole cast of interpreters that really helped with the book. A lot of them were English students at university that we found and contacted the university. We also worked with one English professor. And then our probably most prolific interpreter was Phil, who was a great lover of Trappist beer, who we met on Beer Advocate, and who was a huge help for us. So I love to talk about Phil because he was a great guy, and we actually brought him a bunch of American beers like imperial stouts and IPAs, things he couldn't normally get over there in exchange for his services. So he was awesome, a big burly kind of biker type guy, but who was our
Yeah, we hit it off with him, and he showed us some other of his favorite Belgian breweries around, and he keeps owls. He's just a very interesting man.
Yeah, we got to meet the owls.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, that's really cool. And you're right. Logistically, that is kind of a lot of languages that you have to deal with. So, well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, they were invaluable to the book for sure.
Yeah.
Plus, how often do you meet pet owls?
No, yeah, seriously, we're sitting here like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. I love it.
It was like Hogwarts.
He gave us a
Even
dip
better.
treat. We had a bunch of French fries. Now we're here with him and met his owl.
That's awesome. So once again, thank you so much, Caroline and Sarah and Jessica. We appreciate your time today. And I know that this episode is going to go out after they have a slew of events in Chicago, some signing events. And so do you guys have anything else coming up in the near future around the country after like mid-July or so?
Yeah, check out our website because we are going to finalize some dates for more places in the country. So after we get through Chicago, we'll be strategizing about where to go next.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to just call out a couple of things. Their website is trappistbeertravels.com. That's for the book itself, but you can also find them at bitchbeer.org. Yeah, so you can find them at bitchbeer.org, and they love their beer, you guys. I just want to say they have tabs for you can figure out what's good in Austin and Houston and Dallas and Seattle. Like they're traveling foodies, and I love that. So, and the fact that you did this book is really, really super fun. So one thing we are going to do with our listeners, we're going to have a giveaway for a copy of their book, and we want one of our readers to get this. So head on over to our Instagram account or onto our show notes, and we will have all the details there on how you can win this a copy of and we're going to have them sign it for you. So if you want to just head on over there at hungrysquared.com and then at hungrysquared on Instagram. So, and the other thing you will have to do, and it will be in the show notes and in the Instagram post, but you can go, we'll have you follow them at Trappist Beer Travels on Instagram as well. So just go there, and we're excited to give one of these away because there's so much awesome history and technology and science. I think it's awesome. So thank you so much again for being on today. This was very enlightening.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We had a blast, so yes, thank you.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon, ladies. Hey, any of our listeners out there, are you any of you restaurant owners or managers? So one thing that really can be time consuming and is frustrating is scheduling your employees, because there are a lot of people that want time off. People need shift covers, or there's somebody that wants just to switch their availabilities, and even people calling in sick. It really just can be a lot to juggle as a manager of a small business. And Zip Schedules, who is our sponsor today, takes that load off your hands.
With Zip Schedules, you can handle all of those scheduling tasks in just minutes. And your employee can use this app to communicate with each other. They can swap shifts and update their availability really quick on the app, just on their phone or a portable device. So get your first 30 days for free by visiting zipschedules.com and use the promo code HUNGRY in all caps to receive 20% off each month for up to a year when you sign up. We really like to shout out to Zip Schedules thank you for sponsoring our podcast. Let's have a food fight.
Food fight, food fight, food fight, food fight. It's winter.
This is the segment of our show where you can email us with your relationship questions relating to food. You can email us at hungrysquared@gmail.com.
Disclaimer, we are in no way professional relationship experts, but you should totally listen to us anyway. If you need professional help, please seek it out.
Food fight, food fight. The food fight segment of the show. Here we go.
Sharon, do you have the question?
Yes, I do.
Okay, let's hear it.
Hi, Hungry Squared. My significant other and I have a date night once a week. We usually go to dinner and then do some sort of activity, anything from errands, an evening stroll, or the movies. While at dinner, he tends to look at his phone a lot. We have children, important jobs, etc., but I feel this is our time. What can I do to get him to focus on us and not his phone?
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, Sharon, confession time.
Yep.
I'm that person at dinner. Lee really, I think he's so patient with me, but sometimes I'm like, oh, I gotta check something really fast.
Are you Instagramming your dinner?
No, I'll just take a picture and then I usually put it away. I'll take a picture and then I'll put it away.
Okay. So you save the post for later. That's good.
I'll do that later, but I think I am guilty of that. But I do hate it when I am at dinner with it bugs me too.
Yeah.
So I'm a hypocrite. I know I am. Okay. Don't give me that look.
I think we've all been there though. Sometimes when, especially now versus maybe 6-7 years ago, so less than 10 years ago, but maybe more than 5, when smartphones became the only option for a cell phone anymore, I think we weren't as attached to them for sure.
Mm-mm.
And that cultural norm, I guess you could say, has changed. And so now whenever you're at a dinner party or some type of a get together, if the conversation lulls, you just check your phone. So you don't it's just like a comfort, like a security blanket, I think, in a way. Like if the conversation lulls, you just check your phone. And then maybe you mention, oh, hey, check out this post I saw online with this current event article or something like that. And then you can change the subject that way. I think that, for a lot of introverts like myself, that's kind of a comfort.
I get that. I get that. Like it is a comfort because I do.
Even when you're with your significant other, you see them every day, you love them. I mean, that's just kind of what you do. Like sometimes at night when you're unwinding from the day, you're both on your phone for a little bit.
Yeah.
I think during dinner though, that's not necessarily the place unless you're expecting some type of super important call that cannot wait, or you don't want it to wait. Maybe you're bidding on a house or something and your realtor is going to call you that night and you're out to kind of do a pre-celebration. Sure. Well, check the phone.
Both of you are probably going to be checking your phones.
Sure.
So you'll both probably have your phones out. I agree that the dinner table or if you are eating is not the place because it's sad, but true. But we have the phone has become a comfort, but I also think it's kind of become an addiction for a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
They cannot live without it. And actually I would say, and I'm going to sound like a crotchety old lady and say, the younger generation are they can't deal without their phones. They just can't deal with everything without their phones.
Get off my lawn.
Yeah, that's me. I am married to a crotchety old man and I am a crotchety old lady apparently. But I think, so obviously this is a problem and I think it's a problem in general, but what is your solution for this? Because I can tell you what I do and that's because I know I'm the person that's the problem. I'm the guilty party in this. Lee always has his never on the kitchen table. In fact, he rarely takes out his phone. He occasionally will, if we're just waiting for something and he rarely even takes it out then. So he's very good. So the way I do with it is that I just put my phone far, far away from me when we're eating dinner.
Yeah, I don't. So if I'm at home, I don't take it to the dinner table. Ike puts where he keeps his phone always is in his front pocket. I think it's his front right pocket, if I'm not mistaken. But when we're if we go out to a nice dinner or something like that, or if we're at home, he usually puts it somewhere else. And we've had the same problem at restaurants and stuff like that, where we just kind of delve into our phones sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so we made a rule that when we go out to dinner, both phones are in my purse.
Oh, okay.
And so I don't have my purse on my person. It's usually
hung up somewhere.
Yeah, it's hung up on the little like a little hook next to the booth, or just on a different seat at the table or in the booth. And so neither of us can feel that vibration or anything like that. And we can't hear it.
Right.
Because it's zipped up in my purse.
Well, and I think maybe the first thing you should do is actually have just a quick conversation about it.
Sure. Yeah.
Because if it bugs you, then...
Yeah. I mean, definitely let him know and definitely talk about it. Because when Ike and I were first dating, he, still had that. He would look at his phone a lot when we went out, and he's got 2 kids. And so he's like, well, what if it's an emergency? And I'm like, So we had to kind of talk about that and kind of negotiate how to go around that. So if he's got some type of important job or a business that he's tending to, that kind of thing, you know, you might need to make some negotiations around that.
Yeah. And this is the other thing that I do with this situation, now that I think about it, is that if we are going to have a phone out, we're looking at it together. Because this is the thing that I think is kind of funny and contradictory about social media, is that social media is supposed to help you be more social.
Yeah, socialize with each other.
Yeah, but it totally makes it kind of alienates you and ostracizes. I mean, not ostracizes you, but it kind of makes you can just kind of be in your own little bubble and not pay attention. So if we do ever have a phone out, especially if we're out on a date, then if it's like, oh my gosh, did you see this crazy motivational speaker? Lee showed me this.
Then
Shia
you watch
LaBeouf.
something.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you watch something together. Or you kind of look at an article or something like that together.
So we can kind of talk. And that, like you said, kind of spurs additional conversation. Like, oh my gosh, did you see this article? Talk about it. Or, hey, we're planning this trip. Did you see this thing that we could do? And so so it's a way to...
You can connect with each other if you're sharing the same phone or something like that.
So maybe that's the other thing is if maybe have a rule of like, if we're going to have a phone at the table, we're looking at it together.
Right. Because even if you're looking the same thing up on both of your phones, you will tend to just kind of click something closed and open something else.
Yeah, it's totally true. So
it's just habit.
So I think just talk about it and then maybe set some ground rules, especially for date night. That's important, yo.
Yeah. And I mean, usually dinner at a restaurant, I mean, typically isn't more than an hour. You might have some wait time added on to that. But typically, like while you're at the table, you're there for about an hour or less. Yeah. So I think that is something that could be easily negotiated. You just have to have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I think that works.
So good luck.
Good luck. Don't mess with date night, yo.
Thanks for joining us today on our show. You can find us at hungrysquared.com on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music.
You guys go over to our Instagram, like we mentioned in our interview today, so that you can check out the contest rules. And then once again, thanks again to Zip Schedules, our sponsor, as well as True Aussie Beef and Lamb and the Big Green Egg. We are excited to participate with all of them in all of the things that they're doing, but we wanted to say thank you to them. And so we will see you next week for our next episode of Food Nerdery.
Okay, love you. Bye.
Bye.
Hungry Squared, yeah, Hungry Squared.